So welcome to this webinar, which is InDesign Accessibility Best Practices. Some of you may know us. My name's Chad Chilius, and Dax Castro is also on the meeting with us. We started, you may be familiar with our podcast, Chax Chat, and our podcast, because of Dax and my relationship, kind of evolved into one day Dax and I were like, why are we fighting this? Let's just go into business together, right? Like why are we wasting our time? Let's just jump in head first. And so we now have a business called Chax Training and Consulting, where we do accessibility training, accessibility consulting. We can help your business with the process of implementing accessibility. So we do a lot of different things, and you know, we basically are just very passionate about accessibility, and we want to share that knowledge and help as many people as possible. Feel free to reach out to us at training@accessibilityunraveled.com. That's Dax's address, or chad@accessibilityunraveled.com. That's my address. I mentioned the podcast. We do a weekly podcast. And if you really geek out on accessibility, make sure you listen to that, because we cover a lot of great information. And then another great resource for all of you is our PDF accessibility Facebook group. Dax, how many members do we have now?
We're just about 2,800 members, 27 something.
Yeah. And it's a fantastic resource. I mean, even if you're not a big Facebook user, it's almost worth signing up just so you could use the Facebook group. But Dax and I are also considering other avenues to access that content as well. And then finally, I think I forgot to mention, our website is www.accessibilityunraveled.com. So be sure to check that out. You can see upcoming classes. You can also see information about us. All right, so in this session, InDesign Accessibility Best Practices, you know, a lot of us have been using InDesign for quite some time. I personally have been using InDesign for 23 years. I know it doesn't look like I'm that old. I know it's hard to believe, right? It looks like I'm way too young to have been using it that long. But you know, InDesign is what we're going to be focusing on in today's session. So what are the accessibility tools in InDesign? Well, the color contrast validator, we're going to be talking about this, is not actually a feature of InDesign, but it is via a script. Okay, so we'll talk about that. File metadata, we can add the title to our documents. We can also add the tagging structure to our documents via paragraph styles. We have the articles panel and the layers panel that allows us to control the order of objects in a document. For all of our graphics, all of our images, figures, graphics, we can add alternate text or actual text. InDesign has a very robust hyperlinks panel, probably the best in my opinion. We can add buttons and forms. I actually did a webinar a few weeks ago on fillable PDF forms, accessible PDF forms and InDesign is by far the best tool to use for creating fillable PDF forms, but bar none. And then another plugin that I'm going to introduce you to is the Alt Text Automator. And this plugin is phenomenal, because one of the things that I always say, right, is that as a designer, I am probably the worst person to be adding alternate text to figures and images, right? There are other people probably in your organization who are better suited to that task. And I'm a huge advocate of letting them do what they're good at, right? I'm probably not the best choice. So the Alt Text Automator plugin can really facilitate that process. So I'm going to show you that in a little bit. there are things that InDesign does from an accessibility standpoint just by default with pretty much no intervention on your part, right? What are those items? The table of contents. If you use the table of contents feature in InDesign, it is properly tagged by default. If you use bullets and numbering in InDesign, it is properly tagged by default. If you use header and footers on your pages, basically if you use master pages, those items are automatically artifacted in the exported PDF. So those are things that InDesign will just do for you without any intervention on your part. What are the limitations of InDesign? So InDesign has some really cool features, some of which we need to be aware of that don't really translate well to accessibility. One of those things is drop caps. Drop caps creates a very beautiful, visually interesting element, but when it's tagged, it's not a great result because that letter is kind of broken apart from the rest of the text. And it often will read it as like drop caps, right? So it phrases it in a really odd way. I didn't put this on here, I should have. The other thing I wanted to mention is ligatures, okay? InDesign enables ligatures by default. And you know, we're all designers here, so I'm assuming you guys know what a ligature is, but a ligature is basically a combination of several characters, often like the FL, the FI, I think the FLI, right? So ligatures by nature are not a problem if you use an open type font. But if you're not using an open type font, those ligatures do not map to the proper character. And like a typical example of how a ligature is used is the word office. The double F is often made into a ligature. If you're not using an open type font, that word is often phrased as office, because it doesn't understand that double F, and it reads it in a different way. Grouped elements can also be problematic. Elements that are drawn in InDesign, like sometimes you'll have a graphic element that you're like, oh, I could just draw that right here in InDesign. Adobe, a few versions back, implemented a feature where if you took that group of items and added alt text to it, it would tag it as a figure. In successive versions of InDesign, it broke and it no longer worked. That feature is back in the latest version of InDesign, but there are some things you need to be aware of. Hyperlinks. This is a very frustrating thing for me because in InDesign, when you create a hyperlink, by default, it wants to make that hyperlink a shared destination. If you take anything away from this class, always uncheck shared destination when you create a hyperlink, because there's a bug in InDesign that can create a bit of a mess when you save everything as a shared destination. So my advice to you is always turn that off, and we are going to go over that. And then another issue we're running into with tables, tables fundamentally in InDesign are exported tremendously, does a really great job. The only problem is that a table is always a child of a P tag when you export from Adobe InDesign. And if you're trying to meet PDF UA compliance, that is going to give you an error. The fix is very easy. All you got to do is move the table out of the P tag, but it is something that you have to do after the fact. All right. Things in InDesign that do require extra work. Charts and graphs, right? And if any of you attended our alt text webinar, we talk about how to accurately describe charts and graphs, because that's really the only tool that we have for making a document compliant. When you have charts and graphs, the only way to explain what that graph is about is using alternate text, okay? And then complex tables can also be a challenge, right? And we'll talk about that as well. So where do we start when we start talking about making an InDesign document into an accessible PDF? Like, where do we even begin? Well, one of the areas that I like to focus on from the very beginning is with the color contrast of elements in the document, right? As designers, we typically do a pretty good job here, but I could tell you there are situations where we will design a document and sometimes we'll forget about the color contrast. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but a trend in design right now, and I'm sure you guys have seen it, is to make the body text of the document a light gray. Has anybody seen that? You can raise your hand, virtual hand, or actually a hand in Zoom. Yeah. And, you know, it's done because it's a very trendy thing right now, right? The other thing that's trendy, and I think maybe you guys will appreciate as well, I get a magazine it's pretty modern. It's a fairly trendy magazine. I swear to God, the body copy is like 9-point type, right? And I've only been wearing glasses for like a year, but now I try to read that without glasses and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't read this. I literally cannot read the copy. So, you know, it's something that we all need to think about. And minimum point size is really not a factor for accessibility. It technically is in WCAG AAA, but not at the AA standard. There really is no minimum point size. So it's just a factor that I think we all need to consider as we're building our content. But getting back to the color contrast, I talked about that light gray. A lot of times it does not meet minimum color contrast, right? So what I always tell people, you want to consider color contrast at the very beginning of the process, right? Like my suggestion is when you're in the design stage and you're picking your colors, make sure that your combinations meet minimum color contrast, because you do not want to wait until the PDF file is created. I promise you, like that's the, you know, I get sent PDF files all the time where people say, can you remediate this? And I check the color contrast and it does not meet minimum color contrast. It is really hard to fix at that point in time. So address it up front, address it at the very beginning so that you can nip it in the bud at that point in time. How do we do that? Yes, Paula, question.
Hey, yeah, just before you move on, I was thinking about that, what you said about the point size. And that's an issue I've been having as far as what to recommend for our organization, because it's been brought to, you know, my attention. Well, there's no rule on it. And so
Yeah.
how do you, especially because we have a lot of documents that are, the intention is that it will be printed rather than be shared out digitally. So my question to you is what would you say we should recommend as far as a minimum? We've been saying 12 with footnotes at 9. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, Dax just made himself visible, and that tells me that he has something to say about this. So go ahead, Dax.
Well, the statement that it's not part of accessibility requirements is really not true. It is, the documents have to consider low vision, people with tunnel vision, people with peripheral vision, all of those different vision types, in addition to people who use screen readers. The idea that only people with vision disabilities use a screen reader, or that all people with vision disabilities use a screen reader, is really not the case. There are lots of people with low vision who do, a lot that don't. People with cognitive disability might use a screen reader, but they might not. And so to say that it's never an issue is really not accurate. To the contrary, though, there is no minimum for a PDF document. The National Federation for the Blind does have some recommendations, and there are colleges out there that have come up with their own recommendations. Personally, I will say 12 point is pretty large. I'm going to say, from my own perspective, when I've dealt with a lot of government contracts and they have minimum font size requirements, it's always the big sigh when we get your proposal cannot exceed 12 pages at 12 point. You're like, are you kidding me? Right? So my opinion is that 11 point is probably the largest that I would go from a minimum font size. And I think 8 as a footnote, but that's my own personal preference. The National Federation, like I said, the National Federation for the Blind has some, others have, others, colleges have others, AAA requirements have their own. The idea here is that when it's live text, it's easy enough to zoom in, but then you have to scroll left and right unless your content's reflowable. And inside a PDF, I'm sure Chad's going to show at some point, reflow. It's terrible. And it doesn't provide a really good user experience inside Acrobat. And if you use any colored text, white text on a black background, that text now is invisible because reflow removes any backgrounds that were providing contrast. So the simple answer is, it's whatever you decide. Listening to your requirements, they seem a little large, but not by much. I would pull them down a bit, but that's my preference. So take that for what you may. But just remember, I think the key reason I kind of chimed in here is that accessibility is not just about blind people and screen readers. It is about low vision too. And then remember, when you start doing images of text, none of that is readable by a screen reader. So now you have alt text considerations there as well. So just did that give you enough background, Paula?
Yeah, definitely. I did a training back in like 2016 with the Department of Rehabilitation here in California. Yep. And they put in our documentation that you must have a minimum 12 point font size. And so we started going with that for the last few years. And so we've had people now saying, well, now, wait a minute, now, why are we doing this? So I'm really glad to hear the feedback. Thank you.
HHS is a pretty strong standard. And I'm in California too. I'm in Sacramento. And their standard is specifically knowing that senior citizens with low vision are going to be reviewing their documents. So therefore they take extra care to make sure that things like table summaries and, that you have minimum font sizes. And I think their color contrast is even larger. I think it's 9:1 or something crazy when you're trying to, I forget, there's certain documents that they require to have the higher contrast, but yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, that magazine that I was referring to, I mean, even myself, I mean, I don't have bad vision, but it's not as good as it was when I was 25. And so like it was a challenge for me, right? And so people who have who have a higher level of difficulty reading, I mean, they're definitely not going to be able to read that. So and kind of going off of what Dax said, I mean, we need to remember that accessibility is more than just checking the box, right? Or running the checker and making sure we have all green check marks. We need to consider even beyond that. And I think that's what you're you're kind of talking about, Paula. And also to your point, you also have to know who your client is, right? Because, you know, I work with a lot of organizations who fall under the Department of Health and Human Services, and the standards are not enough for that organization. You have to go above and beyond. You know, now I need table summaries. Now I do need a minimum point size of 12 points. So know your client, you know who you're remediating for. All right, cool. So how do I check my color contrast? I've showed this to you guys before. I love there's an application out there called the Color Contrast Analyzer. Is everybody familiar with that? Have you guys, I think everybody's using that, right? So I'm not going to show you too much here, but you know, down here, if I'm like concerned that this light blue is not sufficient on that dark background, I'm going to check it, right? And as you guys can see, oh, sorry, guys. As you guys can see, this passes for WCAG AA for regular as well as large text, okay? So, you know, you kind of go through your document and just kind of verify that, you know, your contrast is sufficient. Now, as part of registering for this class, we gave you guys a couple of scripts, okay? And one of those scripts, so let me walk you through installing that script, okay? What you want to do is in InDesign, go to the window menu, go to utilities, and then choose scripts. And when this panel opens, you're going to see a folder called user. If you right click on that folder and choose Reveal in Finder in the case of a Mac or Reveal in Explorer in the case of Windows, it's going to show you the folder where you need to put those scripts. So if you simply copy those scripts from the folder that I gave you into this folder, you've now installed those scripts. It's that easy. It's all you got to do, right? And now what you'll see is in InDesign, all of the scripts that you installed are going to be located right here. Now, what I want to show you, one of the scripts that we gave you is a script called the Color Contrast Validator. And I'm going to double click on that script. And you're going to get a dialog box that allows you to compare two swatches or all of your swatches. So I'm going to choose all, and I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to hope that this doesn't take very long because, okay, there we go. So what it does is it evaluates all of the swatches that you have in InDesign. And it builds color combinations of all of those swatches. And do you see how some of the swatches or some of the swatch combinations have a DNP in there? Let me zoom in so you can see this a little bit better. DNP stands for does not pass, okay? And so that lets you know that those color combinations do not pass minimum accessibility requirements, okay? Now, I'm going to show you something else. Give me 1 second. I think it's this script here, the CCV switcher. I'm going to run that. And what that does is it hides any of the colors that don't pass. So now all you're seeing in this document are the color combinations that are valid and meet the minimum color contrast requirements. Pretty cool, right? Now, we did not give you the script to hide the swatches that do not pass. However, if you post on social media about this webinar and you tag Dax and I, we will send you this extra script that will hide any of the colors that do not pass, okay? Any questions about that? Great. All right. So that takes care of our color contrast, all right? So it's something you want to do at the very beginning, up front, and make sure you address that. Now, the next thing that we want to remember is our metadata, right? You guys may be aware that for every accessible PDF file, we need to make sure that we give our document a title, okay? And that title is required for every document we create. A lot of people will make their PDF and then add the title into the PDF. But why take that extra step when we could do it right here in Adobe InDesign? The way we do that is by going to the File menu and choosing File Info. And in, oh my gosh, and in the document title, this is where you can enter an appropriate document title. So in there, I'm going to type EcoFlow Systems Business Proposal, and the author, make sure you change that to EcoFlow Systems. The author is not required, guys. However, it's good metadata to have, right? Because now your organization is going to exist in the metadata of the file. I also like to remind people, you also have a description field and a keyword field. Again, they're not required for accessibility, but this will help with search engine optimization of your PDF file, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now that you've added the document title, that is going to stay with the document moving forward, okay? Now, how do you make sure that your PDF is going to have that title? Well, that is controlled when you export the PDF file. So if you go to your File menu and choose Export, you can use PDF Interactive or PDF Print. Both can make an accessible PDF file. I like to use Interactive because it does an extra thing that I don't have to do after the PDF file is created, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and click the Save button. And if you come up here to the Advanced category, this is where you can tell the document title to be displayed when the PDF file is created. And you can also choose the language. This is really interesting because I just did a test for somebody who is exporting as Swedish, and it seems like it remembered my setting. So we want to be careful about that. I do not want Swedish. I'm going to choose English USA. Oops. All right. And when I export this file, if you have this set to open after export, you will notice and in the title bar of my document, way up at the top here, it says it displays the title instead of the file name. right? So that is your requirement as far as that goes. Okay, excellent. I'm going to go back to InDesign. Let's now talk about our tags, right? One of the most important things that we can control when we're making our PDF file. And actually what I'm going to do, let me go back to the PDF that I created. And what you're going to see, if I go to my tags pane right now, you're going to see that everything in this document, for the most part, is just a P tag. Okay. Now, the danger of that, right? And this is one of those things that InDesign does for you automatically, right? But the danger with this situation is that the checker is not going to flag this as a problem, right? All the checker is checking is to make sure that you have a tag associated with each piece of content. But this situation that we have here violates WCAG info and relationships. And the info and relationship success criteria basically says that elements need to be tagged as what their purpose is. So if it's a heading, it needs to be tagged as a heading. If it's a list, it needs to be tagged as a list, and so on and so forth. What I have here is the equivalent of picking up a newspaper and everything is set in 12-point type. No headings, no captions, just all 12-point type, right? And that would not be a good experience, right? And so by me not having any heading structure in my document, the user has no way of breaking apart the information and understanding the different categories in this document. So let's talk about our tags. Tags in InDesign are controlled by the paragraph styles that you've used in your document. Does anybody in this class not use paragraph styles? Thank goodness. I'm so glad to see that, right? Because paragraph styles are so powerful, right? I mean, not just from a formatting standpoint, but as you're going to see, they're key to making sure that you structure your document accessibly, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my paragraph styles panel. And what you could do, you could start kind of clicking in the different areas of this document to kind of see the different styles that have been used. It doesn't really matter how you name your styles, okay? I know a lot of people who, when setting up a document for accessibility, they will name their styles H1 and H2 and H3. I guess I'm a little more old school because I've been doing this so long. As you can see in my document, I have a style called main heading and subhead and subhead. I think I have a subhead, but I usually do. I just like to name my styles logically the way I'm designing my document. But if you like H1, H2, that's fine. Some people will call it H1 hyphen main heading and H2 hyphen subhead. That's fine. That's totally fine, right? And as a matter of fact, if you do just name your style H1, H2, H3, H4, they will automatically map to that tag automatically. So in some ways, it does save you a little bit of time. But so right here, I have my main heading style. And if I want to map that to a heading 1, which I would want to, right? I'm going to right click on main heading and choose edit main heading. And down here at the very bottom where it says export tagging, this is where you're going to find the PDF tag drop-down menu. And in that drop-down menu, as you can see, we have a number of different tags that we can associate to this style. So I'm going to choose H1, and I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now that main heading style is going to be tagged as an H1 tag. Now, I want to take a step back for a second because some people struggle with the overall concept of headings, right? And what I try to remind people of is that as designers, you made business proposal the biggest text on the page and actually in the document, right? So by nature, you're hierarchically telling that text that it's super important text, right? And that's how you know what your H1 should be, okay? What you want to do is you want to go through your document and you want to assign a hierarchy to each piece of text that you're using. You guys have probably heard Dax and I say this before. There is a misconception in PDF accessibility that you're only allowed to use one H1 per document. That is not true. You can use more than one H1 in a document. And as a matter of fact, in this document, you're going to find that as you scroll through, each chapter is also using that main heading style as the chapter intro. I am totally fine leaving that as an H1 for every chapter intro. Although some people may not like to do that. And if you would prefer that those be an H2, you would have to create a separate style for it, but then you could map that to an H2 if you choose to, okay? Me personally, I don't like burning a heading level by doing that, right? I like to, reuse the H1 and still have 5 heading levels that I can leverage when I'm building my document, okay? So my main heading, I'm just gonna reuse that. Now let's come down here to this EcoFlow Systems text. That is using a style called business name, okay? That text is also important, right? And I think I want to assign a heading level to that. So if I right click on business name and choose edit business name, I can map this to an H2. Proposal issued. That is using a style called proposal category. I think that is also important information, right? So I'm going to map proposal category to heading 3. Let's scroll down to page 5. And here we have some text that says who we are and what we do. That is using a style called subhead, okay? So, you always want to try to think about what was your previous heading, right? And so right here, I'm kind of resetting my heading level back to H1. So if I want this to be a heading, I need to make it an H2. Okay, so if I right click on subhead, I can map that to an H2. Now it's worth noting, and as I'm talking, guys, I think we're all probably in a slightly different situation. If you're the document author, you are intimately familiar with your document, right? You've been in this document, you added all the content, you're really familiar with this. But But for me, a lot of times clients will give me an InDesign file and say, make this accessible. So in cases like that, I kind of have to go through the document and get familiar with it and understand how it was structured, how it was put together. So I don't know if you guys fall into that category as well, but based on your situation, you may need to spend some time, getting familiar with it. But what I did want to show you is we don't have to go into each style individually. If you're familiar with your content, you can come in here in the paragraph styles panel. And if you go to the panel menu up here in the upper right, we have an option to edit all export tags. And if you choose that, you're going to get a dialog box. And you got to make sure, guys, that you click on the PDF radio button. Okay. But now, if I'm familiar with all these styles, I can come in here to subhead short, and I can map that to an H2 as well. I can come in here to, what else do I have? I have phase heading and step heading. I'm going to map both of those to an H2. And I'm going to do that to week heading, project heading, and project heading short, right? So, and you know what? You can also do that to steps, right? So my point here, my point here is that if you're familiar with your content, you can save a lot of time by just going in here to the edit all export tags and setting what tag you want each style mapped to. All right, so we could go ahead and click OK.
Hey, Chad, I had to step
Dax.
away for a second. Michelle had asked about the H tag. Did you, in chat, did you?
I'm sorry, Michelle. No, I'm not really monitoring. I gotta.
Not a problem. And that was why I just wanted to make sure
I
you
appreciate it.
You didn't miss it.
No, Michelle, that's a Michelle, you need to listen. Did we release that podcast yet, Dax?
Not yet.
Okay. So this week, is it today, Dax?
Yes.
All right.
It will go out later today.
Today in our podcast, we talk about that. Okay. So it's a great question, right? And it up until this point, it's been a very contentious thing, right? Because so to explain the H tag here, I'll just bring this up so you can see this, right? You guys may notice that in your tag drop-down menu, there's an H tag, right? The H tag, based on the PDF UA specification, is an ambiguous heading tag that can be used when you have a heading, but it doesn't really fall into the H1, H2, H3 sequence, right? Like, let's say you have a section and you've got a bunch of small headings within there that doesn't really fall into the next level, but you still want them to be headings. The problem has always been that even though it's part of the standard, assistive software reads it as a paragraph. And that's always been the problem. However, Dax and I have recently discovered that we think it's in a recent update to JAWS and NVDA. It is now reading it as a heading. Now, there's a caveat. NVDA just announces it as heading. It doesn't say level 1, level 2, level 3. It just says heading. However, JAWS wants to read it as an H1, which can be a little confusing if you have it like as a, it comes after an H4, but then all of a sudden JAWS is saying, hey, this is an H1, and it's really not a really important heading. So Dax and I are basically saying, you know, in theory, you can use it, but it could create some confusion if they're using JAWS. So overall, I guess we're still kind of saying, try to avoid using it right now because it's still a little bit in flux, but it's promising that we're soon going to be able to use it and leverage it for sure. So I hope that makes sense. I didn't mean to go into a diatribe about that, but it's you know, up until now, we've always said, don't use it. Like, you know, you want to avoid using it because it's not read correctly. But now we're starting to see that there's promise that it will be read correctly. So I hope that makes sense. I hope I didn't bore you too much with my explanation there.
Thank you. No, that was interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Shannon asked, are dashes okay in style names? Dashes are okay. Oh, you did answer her. Sorry.
I did. Yeah.
Oh, it's kind of in reverse though. That was weird. Yeah. So Dax kind of explained, yeah, avoid using unique characters because that can really mess you up, right? Dashes are okay. Underscores are okay. Spaces are okay. But when you start using unique characters, what it does is it breaks the role map. And even though if your style is mapped to an H2, that special character breaks it and it won't be mapped appropriately. It messes it up. The giveaway, I wonder if I can show this.
It's also for form fields as well. When you guys are creating form fields, don't use special characters. We had a form a couple months ago where the person was using apostrophes like possessive S, you know, Facebook's, whatever. And the apostrophe in the form field name was breaking the form.
I'm going to try to show you this real quickly. Although usually when I try to illustrate it, it doesn't work in the way that I want it to. Yeah, it actually worked okay there. I thought for sure that would have broken it.
Is it like gonna break more if it's in the middle of the name, or?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I typically try not to do this, but
Yeah.
but when I try to illustrate it, of course, if it doesn't work, it's fine. But what I'll show you, the way you know that something's amok is what you would typically see is in the PDF, that tag is actually going to have this name on it.
Just undo the role map, Chad, temporarily.
Oh, that's interesting. I think that's new. I think InDesign got smart, and any of those characters, it converts it to an underscore. But I think you'll find in older versions, what you'll typically see. Here, let me do it like this. You'll actually see the name that you named the style. That's what you'll see in the tags pane, and that's how you know the role map is broken. It has no idea what's happening. So that's like the flag. If you see that, change your style name in InDesign to fix that. Adobe doesn't always tell us when they fix stuff. All right. Now, what that's going to do, right? And again, I'm going to export this one more time to illustrate this. But what that's going to do now is that all of your tags are going to be appropriately identified however you map them, right? So if I go into my tags pane now, I'm going to see, oh, let me turn this back on. I'm going to see H1, H2, H3, right? All of my tags are now mapped according to what I set the export tag in InDesign. Okay. Now, identifying your tags is certainly step one, right? The other important component is making sure that those tags export in the correct order. So what controls your tag order? Well, without any intervention on your part, what InDesign does is it starts in the upper left corner, it goes across, and then down. So your tag order fundamentally, without any intervention on your part, is controlled by the position of the items on the page. Okay. So to be fair, a lot of times your page may be structured that way, and it may not be a problem. What I'm going to do, so like what I'm going to do here, guys, I'm going to nudge this frame up a little bit, right? And if I re-export this, and I look at my tag order, do you see how it's reading the text at the top, then the proposal information, and then the main business proposal? And that's because this text was higher on the page than the other content, and therefore it exported first. And trust me, guys, it doesn't have to be by much. This is all done mathematically, right? So if you have an item that's just a hair higher on the page, it's going to export before the other item. Okay. So all that to say, guys, if you rely on the position of the objects on the page, you're rolling the dice a little bit. Okay. So what are other contributing factors to the order of your tags? Well, if the text is flowed from one frame to another, that controls the tag order, right? So if I go to this page, right, you can actually see that this frame on the right is higher than the frame on the left. But because the two frames are flowed together, it doesn't matter. When you have text flowing from one frame to the other, the order is how the content is flowing from page to page. So sometimes you can use that technique as a trick to kind of force your content to flow in a specific order. Downsides to flowing content is when you have like an image that you want to appear at a specific location within the flow of the text. The only way you can control it at that point is to anchor the image to the text. That is done. Here we go. So here you go, guys. You can see how my text is flowing from this frame to this frame. But what happens if I want my image read after the heading? My only option is to anchor the image by clicking on the anchor icon and anchoring it to the text at a specific location. When your text is flowing, that's really your only option. Now, fundamentally, there's nothing wrong with that, other than, let me show you what that does. The only issue we run into with that is that you can see that the figure tag is now a child of the H2 tag. And that's because of how I anchored it to the text, right? And what's probably going to happen is that when you are running this PDF through the path checker, how many of you are using the path checker? Yeah, a couple of you. The path checker is probably going to flag this as an error. And mainly because the figure tag is a block level element inside of another block level element. Yes, Valerie.
If I anchor the image like in a space in between the paragraph and the header, how would that work?
It's going to work the same way. It's just that now it'll be anchored inside of the P tag that follows the heading. Right. So you're going to have the same issue, like fundamentally you'll have the same issue. Again, it's not the end of the world because there's a couple of ways to fix it. One way is for me to just pull the figure out of the heading tag and position it where I want it to be read, right? But it is work you're going to have to do after the PDF has been created, okay? Now, another option for controlling your tag order, and I'm going to unanchor this, right? Oops, no. There we go. Another way that you can control your tag order is by leveraging the articles panel in Adobe InDesign. So the articles panel has one purpose in life, and that is to control the order of objects in your document, okay? The way that the articles panel works, if you go to your window menu and choose articles, that's going to bring up your articles panel. To get started, you're going to grab the first item that you want to be read, and you're going to drag it and drop it onto your articles panel. InDesign is going to want to create a new article, and you could call that article whatever you want. I usually just leave it set to article 1. If I want to, I could call it EcoFlow. Doesn't really matter. What you need to know about using the articles panel is that it's an all or nothing proposition. And what I mean by that is if you decide to use the articles panel, you need to make sure that you add every element that you want tagged in your document, okay? Because right now, if I leave it like this, the only thing that's going to be tagged is that frame up at the top. That's the only tags I'm going to have in my document. Okay. So what I would need to do is I would need to come down here and now grab this frame. And if you watch, I'm going to drag it up, and you want to drag till you get a line underneath the previous item. And then you're going to add that to the articles panel. What I did, guys, to save time is I added a keyboard shortcut to InDesign to add an item to the articles panel. That way I could just click on it, use the keyboard shortcut, and it adds it automatically. Would you guys like to see how to do that? All right. So if you come up here to your edit menu in Adobe InDesign and go all the way down to the bottom and choose keyboard shortcuts. What I would recommend that you do is click on the new set button and name your set. You can see I named mine Chad's Shortcuts. You can call yours Chad's Shortcuts too if you want, but it probably makes sense to use your name. And what you want to do is in the product area, we're going to choose panel menus. And fortunately, the item that we need is right here at the top. You want to click on Articles, Add Selection to Selected Articles. And then down here where it says New Shortcut, you could type in the shortcut that you want to use. I'm a Mac user, so I used Control A. But if you're a Windows user, Control A is going to be used by the Select All command. So you might have to do a different variation. But by doing that, now all I have to do is click on the item. And if I press my shortcut, you can see that that item is now added to the article. So what that allows me to do is I could quickly go through my document and just add these items very quickly. See how much faster that is? And when you have items that are threaded like this, you only have to add the first frame. This is going to come along for the ride. You don't have to do anything to that item. So it really allows you to kind of add all of your content very quickly.
Chad, when doing a whole book, what would you say is the best method then? Linking everything together or doing this, like we're talking hundreds of pages?
Yeah. It's really your call, Nancy. You know, I know it takes a little bit of time to do. The shortcut really makes it a lot faster, but you're right. I mean, if it's a 160-page book, you're probably going to be spending a little bit of time adding everything to the articles panel, but it's kind of a balance between how much control you want. I know, Nancy, I would wait. The problem with flowing everything, again, is, you know, getting the items to be in the right location. And if you have images that you want after this paragraph, it makes it hard, right? So what I like to do when you have a lot of flowing content, I like to break it into chapter. Like, I don't like to have everything one big flowing thread of frames. I will at the very least do it by chapter, because that way you have the ability to position photos at the end of the chapter or at the very beginning of the chapter, depending on what you want. But when it's all threaded, it kind of complicates things, you know? So at the very least, that'll save you time, because you only have to do one chapter and then everything will come along for the ride. But you will have to grab the photos if you want to include them in your content.
So,
Yeah, Dax.
oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Eventually, could you figure out, like, how do you handle the flow then with complicated tables that may run, or any table that runs more than one page? Like, are you doing it this way with the, you know, articles panel? Or,
Well,
because you can't link a flowable table that runs more than one page.
well, what do you mean by that?
Like, if you have a table that runs more than one page, you're not able to link it because it's flowing into a second text box or whatever.
Link it to what?
To where the body text is, so that it's you know, it's near the call out of the body text. So are you saying you just put it at the end?
Your table, right? Your table should always be in the same frame as your body, right? So do you see here how this table is just an element within the same frame? Okay. So I'm wondering, like, are you putting your table in a separate frame?
Yes, we receive them separately, but I'm wondering, okay, if the table is longer than the text box itself for that page, will it flow automatically then to the next page? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So here,
that answers
like, if
that.
what I'm going to do is I'm going to force this. And what I'll do, I'll tell you what, I'll just for demonstration, I'm going to link this. I know this doesn't look good, but let's just pretend we want it to link down here, or actually, you know what I can do? Let me just move it up here. Okay. So fundamentally, there's nothing wrong with this. And one of the things that I purposefully did this in this table, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but that's okay. So every table in InDesign, or any table in an accessible PDF, has to have a header row, right? And so InDesign, unfortunately, only gives us the ability to assign a column header to a table. I can't define row headers. But the way that you do that is you highlight that top row and you go to your table menu and choose Convert Rows to Header. And because I have a table style assigned to this table, it automatically formatted it. But then the secondary effect of that is that now your header repeats in the frame in which the table is linked, right? So that is an issue, right? Because, well, let's do it.
If we could stop, I think I want to inject a comment real quick that goes back to what we were talking about before while you're while you're doing that. So when it comes to threading your content, right? We were talking about large documents, and Chad's absolutely right. I do the same thing, chapter by chapter threads. But one thing to remember is that if you're drawing tiny little text boxes to just capture a heading in one part of the document, because you want it centered in this one little spot, rather than using the entire text frame, and you end up with a bunch of little boxes linked everywhere, InDesign can crash. Because when you start reflowing or adding text and it's got to try to reflow all of those pieces, InDesign, I had a document literally crash like 30 times in the past while I was trying to edit it, because someone had put like the heading in just a tiny little box on the top of one page, rather than using the entire frame and centering the text, you know, in the page frame itself. I don't know if that makes sense, but just as you're threading, just try to take advantage of your full margins, all of your area. And then really, I find that I only have very few occasions where I don't thread or anchor images in my text boxes where they go, right? So it's very seldom that I have I want to put this item inside my thread, but I can't because of some situation. So
Yeah.
Sorry, I just didn't want to get too far along before we.
No,
Yeah.
no, not at all. So, you know, what you're seeing here, let me see if I can show this to you. Yeah. So you see how when I click on this table, right, in InDesign, it's highlighting the table on both pages because it is one single table. Where InDesign fails, right, is that if you open up the table structure, we have a T head for the header up here, then a T body for all of these rows, but then it repeats the T head and the T body where it extends to the second page, right? Which is not a good situation. What you really want to do is we want to artifact the repeating header on the second page. If you click on the content object, we can right click and say change tag to artifact. And then I can delete that extra T head. And then what I do is I just move the body rows from the rows on the second page. One of those is empty anyway, and I just move them into the first T body. And now you can see that my table is structured as one single table, one T head, one T body. And that's also going to avoid you getting any errors in the PDF. I just want to, as a side note, like this is one of the huge benefits. I use a plugin for InDesign called Made to Tag. And one of the beautiful things about that plugin is it deals with this situation for me. It knows that the repeating head is no good. It gets rid of it and it just addresses the problem for me. So not to segue or anything, but if anybody is interested in potentially a made to tag session, email me and just let me know. I mean, if there's enough interest, that's something that we could definitely possibly put together in the future. All right. But I'm glad you brought that up because it's one of the areas where InDesign does have a limitation. And the good thing about InDesign is that it structures your tables very well, right? It does a great job. But when you have that table that spans more than one page, there is going to be some cleanup required at the end. Yes, Valerie.
I had a question concerning the images in the text flow.
Yeah.
So when you anchor them, it has to be really like, I mean, you could not have a design, or could you have a design where you have like an image with a runaround, and then that, you know, it has to be anchored after like a paragraph or after It
Mhm.
can't be just like in the middle of the text with the runaround. Is it
Well-
like that wouldn't be possible?
No, it's possible. The challenge you're going to face. So here, I think I have one right
Yeah.
here, right? So I have a text wrap applied to that image. Here's the problem you're going to run into. Let's say you said to me, Chad, I want this image anchored right here after the heading. Is that kind of what you're saying, Valerie?
Mm,
Or tell me
I-
where you want it anchored.
Yeah,
Tell me where
I
you
would
want it.
put the image like that, like right in the middle of the text on the right, for example, you know? Like
Right
it,
here.
yeah, like the text really, it's like in the middle of the text.
Oh,
If you put
like
the
right
image,
here.
yeah, kind of.
Okay.
That
Well,
wouldn't
no,
be possible.
but we're talking about, so I think where we're getting confused here is that Valerie's talking about the actual placement of the image versus where
Yeah.
it's anchored. It can be anchored anywhere
Oh, right.
inside the paragraph,
Right.
regardless of where it's placed. But go ahead, Chad.
Well, it can and it can't.
Right. And that's
Right,
what you're getting
because-
ready to show. Right.
Because there's a
Okay.
limitation in InDesign, right? So let's say you're saying, I want it anchored after the word remain.
Yeah, for
Right.
example.
So watch what happens.
Yeah, that's why. Okay, so that couldn't work.
Text wrap, how do I explain this? Text wrap cannot apply to the paragraph in which the image is anchored. Okay. So like a lot of times what I have to do is like anchor it down here. Ooh. Maybe not. But I guess my point is you have to get creative, right?
Yeah, okay.
You know, let me give me a second. I'm gonna back up the
But Dax,
truck.
what you said, you're right. You know, I forgot that I could put the image anywhere and then anchor it. The anchor just tells where it's gonna say the alternate text.
Exactly. Except for the
Yeah.
fact that the visual anchor, the anchor changes what can be wrapped. So when Chad placed that anchor in the
Mhm.
paragraph, it didn't allow for the text wrap.
No.
So
Yeah.
what I've done in the past is I've created just a ghost outline, just an object, and anchor and put that as my text wrap, kind of as an artifacted object, and then had my actual image anchored where I want it and then move it back up into place. So basically there's two objects sitting on top of each other. One is the thing that the text is using to wrap,
Oh,
and
right.
the other is my image.
Yeah.
So like
okay.
what you would do is on this image, turn off the text wrap and anchor it wherever you want it to go. But then you would draw a new frame over top of it
Yeah,
and
that
apply
does
the text wrap on it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Get
So
it. Great.
so it's a little bit of a cheat, you know what I mean? But it totally works. And that way you're not relying on the image to do the wrapping, you're relying on another
Mhm.
element.
Yeah.
And what I will tell you, this is another little tip, right? When you make that empty object, right? For demonstration purposes, I used a graphic frame. That frame will not get artifacted by when I make the PDF file. However, if you change the content to be unassigned, it will.
Great. Okay.
So maybe you should talk about that for a second, though, Chad. The 3 states that a frame can be, or that an object can be. And then I think after that, we should probably take a bio break. We're at halfway.
So the unassigned will automatically be artifact.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
So just to kind of illustrate this, up here, I created 3 separate frames. This guy is a text frame. This guy is a graphic frame. And this guy is an unassigned frame. Okay. And the other thing I will point out about this while we're on this topic, the unassigned frame, if you remember at the beginning, I talked about this a little bit about an object drawn in InDesign, you're supposed to be able to add alt text to it and it'll convert it to a figure. That only works if the frame is an unassigned frame. Okay. But you have control. If you select a frame and go to the object menu, you can choose content. And it will tell you what kind of frame it currently is, but also gives you the ability to convert it to another type of frame. And so if I choose unassigned, now that converts it to an unassigned frame as opposed to whatever type of frame it was. So that's a really handy thing to know as you're building content in InDesign. Any questions about that? Awesome. Okay. So Dax is right. We're about halfway through our webinar here. Why don't we go ahead and take 10 minutes so everybody can, you know, grab something to drink, use the restroom, and let's be back here. Actually, we're at like, why don't we just say 1/4 to the hour? We'll come back. Sound good? Okay.
All right.
See you guys in a few. Point is that you have create tagged PDF chosen, right? That's critical, right? If you forget that, trouble. If you forget that, it's a lot of trouble. So create tagged PDF. And then this is also the interactive PDF setting automatically can set your tab order in the PDF. The print setting does not. And it's mildly annoying, not very hard to fix, but it's kind of annoying that, you know, that one doesn't have it. But use structure for tab order. You also want to make sure you enable. Honestly, everything else is really preference, right? I know, like for me, a lot of times I like to set my layout. You could set it to single page, 2 up. I usually let it set to single page, but what I normally do is I set the view to fit the page. Because that way, when a user opens the PDF, it automatically fits the document to the window. And I just think that's a nice experience, you know, for somebody who's reading it. If it's
also a note, if you use the articles panel to set your content order, make sure that you have the dialog box for use content order or use articles order for exporting. That checkbox when you export the PDF doesn't automatically set the articles panel as the read order.
Yeah, I think I might have gotten distracted after we had done the articles panel, but Dax is absolutely right. After you've used the articles panel, it's critical that you come up here to the panel menu and turn on use for tagging order in tagged PDF. If you forget to do that, it's as if you never used the articles panel. So you need to make sure that that's checked in order for everything to function. Okay. Yes, Alice.
Yeah, it's just about the unassigned frame. I'm not sure to hear that well. Is it like when we put as an object as an unassigned frame, is it automatically an artifact when we export the PDF?
If it's unassigned?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So
yep.
we don't really need to create like an object with artifacts automatically when we create everything to be artifact. I don't remember. When I create on InDesign, you have the object style, and usually I use an object style called artifact. So we don't really need to do that because we just have to put the unassigned as an unassigned frame.
Well, Well, no, and so I love the use of an artifact object style, but that can be used for like a photograph, right? Like in the case of you don't want a photo to be read. You still need to do that for items like that.
Okay.
Okay.
I think where maybe if I'm understanding Alice, you're under the assumption that if you create an object and you make the frame unassigned, that it's going to automatically artifact that object. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
And
that
chat,
is correct.
Okay.
That is
Thanks.
correct. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
But all you can do with you can't put a picture in an unassigned frame. So all you can
That
do
is
with
correct.
an unassigned frame is like
Okay.
make a color box. That's the only thing I think
Okay.
you can do.
Right. People use them sometimes to make bar charts. They might accidentally make a bar and make it an unassigned frame, that kind of thing. So some people use them as drawing objects, but yeah.
And to be fair, you can put an image in an unassigned frame. InDesign automatically converts it to a graphic frame in order to do that, though. So yeah,
Okay.
but yeah, you are correct. Okay, so back to exporting. If I export to the PDF print setting, then very similar. Again, in the general category, you need to make sure that create tagged PDF is chosen. And then also, you would want to make sure also to turn on bookmarks and hyperlinks so that they get included in your PDF as well. Okay. But again, in the print setting, one of the big omissions is the setting of the tab order. And so if I make my PDF this way, I'm going to have to take an extra step to fix that once the PDF is generated. So but
don't
yeah,
use
so
it.
it'd be this one, this one, and this one, right? And then of course here you could say fit page and you could say single page, very similar to the previous one. But yeah, but again, I prefer interactive. Yes, Valerie.
So if you have a document that's going to be printed and PDF'd online, it'd be better to do 2 separate exports.
Yeah, I mean, you know, because typically if you're creating a PDF for print, your resolution is going to be much higher than it would be for online use anyway. So yeah, you know, I'm a huge advocate of single source output, right? So from the same file, one for print, one for accessibility, right? And there's no reason why you can't do that. Yeah, I really try hard not to create a separate InDesign file only for accessibility, right? It's just too much confusion and you know, so that's my personal approach. Cool.
Thank you.
Now, absolutely. So we talked about tag order, okay? A very confusing principle that we have to deal with in PDF accessibility is the fact that there are 2 orders to contend with. We have tag order and we have reading order. Now I'm going to open my PDF for a second. Oh, wait. Okay. You know what? I think when I was doing that, I think I might have removed the old one. Let me do that again. Okay, so in the PDF file, if you go to your accessibility tool and click on reading order, you are going to see that the items on your page are numbered. Okay. This is what we refer to as the reading order. I've referred to it as the flow order in the past, but the reading order, the WCAG standard states that your PDF file needs to be able to be read by all technologies. And although JAWS and NVDA uses the tag order as the order of your content, there are other software applications that choose to use the read order. So it's important for us to make sure that we set both orders in the document. And as I look at this first page, the order looks pretty good. And I also want to point out that I have the page content order turned on. You can also show the structure, which will show you the type of tag. But for my purposes, I'm going to show the content order. And I'm going to go down to this next page. So page 4 looks pretty good, but page 5 is a little wonky, right? And the reading order gets a little tricky because I can't even tell where number 1 is. But you know, I'm not really too concerned about it, to be honest. So what I want to show you is how to control that order in Adobe InDesign. So I'm going to go down to page 5. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, no, you know what? No, you know what? That was my bad. You know what I should have done? That was showing that because I output the document as spreads, and I should have output them as pages. Let me redo this real quickly. Sorry about that, guys. There we go. So reading order. And so now, so that page does look pretty good. Let me see if I have one.
Chad, this is Shannon.
Yeah.
Does your reading order show the way that it does because you put all of the frames into the articles panel? Because in mine, it just has like 1, 2, and it's all just showing the blocks of text.
So to answer your question, no. The articles panel controls your tag order, not your reading order. Okay, that's very important to understand, right? So the articles panel in no way affects the reading order that we're looking at right now, but it does do the tag order. I think what you're running into, I'm sorry, who was talking?
Shannon.
Shannon. There you are. So I was looking for you on my screen. So Shannon, I think what you're running into in the reading order panel, do you see this item here that says display like elements in a single block?
Yes.
Uncheck it.
Okay. Now it looks like yours. Thank you.
Does that look better? Okay. Yeah. It is, I believe it is on by default in Acrobat. But to your point, it's not very helpful. I like it so I can see each individual element. So this page, it's kind of broken. Problem is, I think I fixed all of these already. And I need to break one for our purposes. Oh, here we go. This is a good one. So if you go to page 25 in the document, you can see that on this page, the items are not in the correct order, right? So you can see the terms down here is read first, and then this over here, it's kind of all over the place, okay? So how do we fix that? Well, I'm going to close this, go back to InDesign, and I'll go to page 25. And your reading order in InDesign is controlled in the layers panel. So if you open up your layers panel and you click on the disclosure triangle, the way that this works, guys, is I'm going to click on the first frame on the page. And if you look in your layers panel, that frame is the topmost object in the document. All right. This is kind of weird, but if I want this object read first, I need to click on this object and drag it all the way down to the bottom of my stacking order. Now, do you see how there's like a rectangle, a polygon, a rectangle? Those are those gray rectangles in my document, and they are not counted in your reading order. So I technically don't need this to be all the way down to the bottom. I'm going to move it up above that rectangle so that the stacking order of my objects is still correct. But those rectangles are not counted as an item that's going to be read. Does that make sense? And then if I click on terms, okay, that is actually the next item being read. And then payment information, that's next. And then I'm just going to click on these items and I'm going to organize them so that they're read in the order that I want them to. Oh, and actually, does that make sense, guys? So if I re-export this, and I go to page 25, now you can see that the reading order for this page is now correct. And if it's not, then you just need to go back in and just make another adjustment so that it reads it in the order that you want it to be read. So we have our tag order that is controlled either by the position on the page or the articles panel. And then you have your reading order that is controlled in the layers panel. It's basically your stacking order from bottom to top. And you can ignore shapes, right? And you know, whether it's you know, a rectangle, a polygon, whatever, they are not included in that ordering. Does that make sense, guys? Excellent. All right. So another important thing that is often forgotten when you're making a document accessible is hyperlinks. So implicit hyperlinks in a PDF file. And what I mean by that is any hyperlink that is spelled out, right? www.accessibilityunraveled.com or www. whatever. Acrobat will auto detect them, right? Acrobat automatically recognizes it and makes it a clickable link. However, that link is not accessible. And that's a real big misconception. You know, people are like, oh, all of these are links. I can click on them. They're not accessible, right? And that's a big problem. So InDesign gives us the hyperlinks panel that allows us to apply a hyperlink to a text or an object, to be honest, that you want it applied to. Okay, so if I go to my hyperlinks panel, you could get to it by going to the window menu, interactive, hyperlinks. Okay, and what's really cool about InDesign, and I did this part on purpose, by the way, what's really cool about InDesign is that it actually goes out to the internet and checks to see if it can access the URL that you put in that hyperlink. And if it can't resolve it, it's going to give it a red dot saying, I can't access this URL. But if it can, it'll give it a green dot. I've worked with several organizations that part of the process is they have somebody click on every link in a document to make sure that they can get there. And InDesign just does it for you, which is really, really cool. So how do we make a hyperlink? Well, we're just going to kind of make one here. I'm going to zoom in on an area. And if you select some text, at the bottom of the hyperlinks panel, you can click on the plus sign, and that allows you to create a hyperlink for that selected text. So I'm going to make this up, guys. I'm going to have this go to our website. And as I mentioned before, always uncheck shared hyperlink destination.
What that does again?
So the purpose of shared hyperlink destination is if you're reusing a link in multiple places in your document, then it's okay, right? Then that's fine. But Dax and I have run into some really ugly situations. We don't fully understand why, right? Like we don't entirely understand why, but what will happen is when you highlight the link tag where you made a link, it actually highlights it in multiple locations of your document. It's very bizarre. It's very bizarre. And it's just a bit of a mess. It's really hard to fix. It's really time consuming. And so for that reason, we're like, just uncheck it, turn it off so that you don't have that problem.
Even if you have the same link somewhere else?
I mean, I've used it. I mean, if you are reusing it multiple times, it seems to work okay.
Okay.
What I think is happening, this is hard to explain, but the shared hyperlink can only be so long. And what I think is happening is the shared hyperlink is overwriting other shared hyperlinks. I think that is what's happening. And because of that, it creates this really bizarre conflict in your document. So I would say as long as you're using it appropriately, go for it. It should be okay. But unless you're using a shared hyperlink, uncheck it. Yeah. So when I click OK, right, now you can see my hyperlink is green so that it knows, right, and it's working correctly. And now what I also did, I didn't show this to you. When you create your hyperlink, you can also apply a character style to the hyperlink if you want to. So if you want your hyperlink to look a certain way, you could do that with a character style. Okay. But if not, you could just say none. And then it won't change the formatting of that hyperlink. And the benefit of doing that is you'll see, oops, that's not the right one. The benefit is you'll see that there's a link tag in the tag structure around that hyperlink with a link OBJR object. That's an object reference. And that link is now accessible because it's properly tagged. Oh, Shannon, I see your comment about the shared hyperlinks. Yeah, it's a mess. Yeah, Dax and I have dealt with files that other people have created, and we found like all those links are just so messed up.
I've had to reset literally probably 200 links by hand in a document because they just, every time I tried to fix one thing, another thing would break. And in the end, I just flattened the document. Well, I didn't flatten it. I copied the link, deleted the link, and then reset it for each one. Yeah, not fun.
Yeah,
No.
same here. We've had multiple files where the links have been there and it's gone through production editing and they've seen them in the PDF. And the next time we open the InDesign file, they are all gone. And we're like, what happened? And it always is a shared link somewhere in the file that we can point the problem to, but we don't know why or how it's happening.
I'm going to put in the chat.
When I go to Adobe Max, it's my #1 priority to go bend the ear of our contact at Adobe to find out, to figure out, at least to give us some troubleshooting time so we can work with the engineers to at least understand what's going on.
So guys, I put a link in the chat to my friend's website. He has a free script on there, and it's called Remove Shared Hyperlinks from InDesign. And if you run that script, it'll wipe out all of your shared hyperlinks in the document. And then there's another script on that site that that he and I wrote together that is prepare document for accessibility. And what that does is a number of things, and you can read about it on his website, but one of the things it'll do is it looks at the name of your styles. And if something is called like main heading, it'll automatically map it to an H1. And if it's called a subhead, it'll automatically map it to an H2. So check that out. He's got some good scripts on there, but those are two that I really think are worth it. Yes, Alice, you have a question?
Yeah, about the hyperlinks. There is a panel inside with the accessibility tool. Do we need to add alternative text or not? Because I saw both solutions that some people add alternative text to hyperlinks and sometimes not so.
So the PDF UA standard requires that every hyperlink has alternative text, okay? Now, that being said, that stems from the period of time when it was very common for us to use click here for a hyperlink, right? You know, or you know, go here or download this, you know. And the problem is that, okay, I have a hyperlink, but where is it taking me? Right. And that was the problem with that practice. Since then, I think we all, and if you're not aware of this, please speak up. But I think we're all understand that that's a bad practice, right? Like using just click here is not a good approach. That's why in the edit hyperlink panel, you can, if you wish, put alt text for your hyperlink in here, okay? There's certainly nothing wrong with that, and it does work. That being said, if your hyperlinks contain meaningful text, right? Like meaning if all of your hyperlinks have descriptive text for the hyperlink, there's an easier way of fixing that. And that is in Adobe Acrobat.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're not aware of this, guys, in Adobe Acrobat, if you go to your print production tool down here, and you open your pre-flight panel, at the very top here, if you choose PDF standards and then click on the wrench icon, you will find under the interactive elements and properties a fix-up to create content entry for link annotations. And I know the name of this is a little weird, but it's basically add alt text for all of your hyperlinks. And as long as your hyperlinks contain meaningful text, what this fix-up does is it sets the alt text to whatever the text is for the link. And that is completely acceptable because you have meaningful text.
Okay.
But if your document did use click here, it'll technically satisfy the requirement, but it's not correct.
So that requirement is going away. So I talked with Adobe, I talked with Rob Haverty about this specifically, because no screen reader right now reads the content key. So you hear people say, well, I made my alt text in InDesign, I exported it and I don't see any alt text, or the person checking my document says there's no alt text on here. And the answer is, well, it's in the content key. That's where it's supposed to be. Well, no screen reader reads the content key. So here's one of those things where we're doing something for the technical aspect of accessibility that doesn't actually benefit people using the screen reader. So Rob Haverty, who is the product manager for InDesign, has said, I'm not fixing this tool until the new version of PDF UA comes out, because this whole standard of content key is going away. When they originally put out the this tool, it was writing it in the alt text, and all the technical geeks, and I use that term affectionately, at the PDF UA Association said, no, that's the wrong thing. You're not technically doing it right. So Rob said, okay. He went back and redid it. And then now it's not read by screen readers. So just realize that, yes, you should put it in there, but running Chad's fix of that other option is also, completely viable. So,
if you need to provide a report to your client, which I think a lot of us possibly do, I know, like whenever Dax and I remediate files for clients, we always provide them with that accessibility report. We do it to kind of cross off the requirement, right? But as Dax is pointing out, it really doesn't have much value at present time, so, but it does look good to have the report have all the green check marks, you know what I mean? So, and it doesn't take very long to run it. So anyway, Paula has a question. Go ahead, Paula.
Yeah, just kind of responding to what Dax said there. So do you not use that accessibility alt text tool at all in InDesign for your hyperlinks? Because it's just
Typically
a waste of
not.
time. It's wasting time, right? Because it doesn't make its way to PDF.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a tricky one, because there are times when keep in mind, like a lot of times Dax and I are getting documents from other people. So a lot of times those documents will have an implicit hyperlink, right? Where it says www.adobe.com or www. So for websites like that, I do add alternate text for them, because if I run the fix up, all it's going to do is plug in the URL instead of a legitimate description. So it's a toss up. It really is. But sometimes I will take the time to do it.
It goes back to usability versus compliance, right? Do I really want someone to know where they're going before they click this URL? If the URL is YouTube, u.tube, blah, 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 they're going to know it's going to a video. But if it's some obscure bit.ly link or something that's going to take them to go download a 100 meg document or whatever, I might want to give them that extra information, because there's no way to know what happens next. Imagine you can't see a new window open up and it's opening a Dropbox link and it's all of a sudden starting to download, and you don't really know what's going on, and you have to wait to kind of hear interaction to figure it out. That can be very, if I'm on a really slow connection, I might not want to download a 200 meg document right now, right? So it's about context and whether you really are focused on usability. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Someone should make a tool that converts the content key to alt text. That would be super, like in PDF. But yeah, good luck with that.
Well, so Dax, to be clear, if you have alt text on a link, do screen readers read it?
Yes, but you can't set that in InDesign.
Right. Although, ironically, we used to be able to.
Right. That's what I was saying earlier. They had it right. Yeah. The coder screamed about it, so he fixed it, and now it's wrong because no screen reader uses it. So I give up.
Yeah. We should work on a script to somehow do that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me close out of this and we'll go back to InDesign. So I mentioned this before, guys, and this is really not a difficult thing, but it's something that's worth mentioning. And I'll tell you why. Do I have any former Quark Express users in the class? Is anybody willing to admit? more than I realize. How many do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4. Almost half of you were former Quark Express users. And I bring this up for a specific, oh, 5 of them. Shannon just raised her hand too. I bring this up for a very specific reason because Quark users tend to do what I'm about to show you. This is a bulleted list, okay? And if you look in InDesign, right up here, you can see that I've used my bulleted list formatting property. And by doing that, you'll notice I can't select the bullet because it's being automatically applied, right? When you use the bulleted or numbered list formatting button, it automatically will get tagged as a list, okay? However, what I often find people doing is they like to manually type the bullet. I think that's a dingbat. Where are you? You know what?
Like
Maybe it's not a ding.
It's like Control-Shift-8 for the bottom.
Oh, it's a wing. It's actually a wing ding. That's why I couldn't find it. So, where are you?
Third row up from the bottom. Nope, you were there. Third row up from the bottom. 6 call. Yeah, just to your left there. Isn't that it right there?
No, but I'm going to use it. It's fine. Okay, there we go. So what a lot of users like to do is they'll type the bullet followed by a space and then say, this is my next item. And of course, I got to change this to I think you guys get the idea, right? So, right. So if you use this technique, they are not mapped to a list. It's just going to be a paragraph. And that's the problem with that. So the moral of the story is when you're creating a bulleted list, make sure you use the bulleted or numbered list formatting buttons so that they're properly exported. Okay. But Quark users like to keep doing things the way they always have, and they like to type the bullet and then the space and everything. The other thing, oh, I see what I was doing here. The other thing that a lot of people make the mistake, you can see that I have a style here for my bullets. I don't know why people do this, but what they tend to do is in the export tagging, they change this to a P tag. Do not do that. Do not do that, because it will not output as a list then. It just exports them as basic paragraphs. So InDesign is trying to do you a favor, and you want to leave that set to automatic, and then InDesign will properly output that as a bulleted list. Okay, so try to avoid changing that.
It's why I always check the edit all export tags before I save my PDF as a final step.
You know what, that makes me think, Dax, I should add that to the script.
Yep.
Check to see what the bullet, although how would it know? I'll have to work on that. But anyway, I'll bet there's a way we can do it. So anyway, so yeah, bulleted lists, make sure they're mapped appropriately. Let's talk about alternate text for our graphics. Okay. Actually, we're going to talk about two different things, right? Because when it comes to figures, right, whenever you're working on a document for accessibility, you need to ask yourself the question that probably the first question you always want to ask yourself is this figure relevant? Does it have any value? Okay. And so Dax, what's the policy on headshots?
The only time it really matters to describe someone's headshot is if there's something unique that you care about. If they are blind, if they are of a particular gender, or there's some visual identification that you can clearly see, or you can interpret from the image that someone using assistive technology would be missing out on, right? If you were to say, if it said our diverse team members, well, maybe our diverse team members means we have a Hispanic treasurer and whatever. That it matters more than just John Smith or Jane Doe smiling in for the camera. If it matters, then you might add alt text, but 90% of the time it does not matter. And you really don't need to say image of or headshot of Mia, Miss Jane, I can't read that from here, Miss Jane, whatever, because it's just going to say her name right afterward, right? Miss Jane Miller, right? Headshot of Jane Miller, Miss Jane Miller. It's adding the same text twice. So I wouldn't do that in this case.
Yeah. So, whenever you're working with figures, the first question you have to ask yourself is, does the figure have value, right? Does the image have value? We as designers are kind of notorious for using imagery strictly for aesthetic reasons, right? A lot of times the opening spread of a project will have this beautiful image. It doesn't really relate to the content. It's really just a pretty picture, right? So the question is, does it have value? And if the answer is no, right, then you probably want to artifact it, right? Now, there's two ways to artifact an image in InDesign, right? The first way is to click on your image, and if you go to Object Export Options, in the tagged PDF section up here at the top, where it says Apply Tag, we can choose Artifact. And that, of course, is going to artifact that image. The other way is to simply not include the image in the Articles panel. So if you're using the Articles panel, which I actually am, and I actually did add these to the Articles panel, I can simply click on that and hit the trash can and say, don't include these in my content. Right? Easy as that. So, part of your approach is going to be, did I use the Articles panel? If I did, let's just not include it. But if you did not use the Articles panel, then you're going to need to go to the Object Export Options. And I wanted to tell you guys, one of the things that I did, because I got tired of going to Object Export Options, is I assigned a keyboard shortcut to Object Export Options. So I could just click on a figure and hit the keyboard shortcut, and that brings up my Object Export Options very easily. And again, if you wanted to do that, you simply go to your Edit menu, go to Keyboard Shortcuts, and then here in the product area, you want to go to the Object menu. And then if you scroll down to Object Export Options, you can add a shortcut here. You can see I used Control Option Command X because it made sense in my crazy brain. But You can make it whatever keyboard shortcut you want. Valerie, you have a question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if, for example, I'm doing a document and where I know that all my images are going to be artifact for whatever reason. Is there a way to do that like option before, and that every element that I'll do, it will already be checked? Like, do you
You mean like
understand?
every figure?
Why, like every image box, for example, can I pre-option that? Am I clear?
You mean, can you set it as the default?
Yeah.
So in a document, make sure that you have nothing selected.
Oh. Yeah, okay.
You can't do it that way. I think what you're going to have to do is make an object style called artifact.
Right. Okay.
And if you click on that object style with nothing selected in your document, that will become the default. And so now if I create a new graphic frame,
No,
that
so
did
it doesn't
not
work.
If you go to right click, go into your object panel. And then if you go into the object styles panel and hit the hamburger menu. So, and then go down to default graphic frame style or default text frame style. You can then set it to a object style or text that you've set up already.
Well, what I did that. It's automatically set as the default. Let me try something else. What if I place
and Valerie, the other question is, why would, if I were doing that, I honestly would just be using the articles panel and then not dragging in these objects into the articles panel.
Okay, right. Okay. Well, I was just wondering if it could be like a default that could be there.
Yeah, that doesn't seem to work, Valerie.
Okay,
like
it's
even
good.
though I set that as the default,
okay, we'll just
let me. Oh yeah, look at that. Even though I set it as the default, it didn't apply it.
Is that graphic frame, was that frame set as a, it is, yeah.
Yeah, and it is actually, it's set as the default.
Interesting.
Huh. Yeah, it seems to be a bug. Now, what you could do, like if you were able to say, Valerie, every image I want artifacted, what you could probably do is go to Find Change, go to your object category, and I could say find
Chad, is that you?
I don't think so.
Is your Roomba running?
No.
Okay.
I know I've been guilty of that in the past, but it's not me this time.
Oh, it is Valerie.
Probably me.
It's Valerie.
That's
all
okay.
Good. No worries. No worries. Just FYI, we got about 20 minutes left.
But it's fine. You can go ahead. I mean, it's obviously complicated and not easily possible. So that's really what I wanted to know. So all good.
Okay. Yeah, I thought I might be able to run a find change and find every graphic frame.
There's no easy way. That was more my question. So all good. Don't worry.
Yeah. Sorry. But, you know, the object style, the artifact object style is very helpful because you could come in here and select all these images and then just go to your object styles and say artifact, boom, and that'll take care of them too. Okay, so that's artifacting. What about okay, I do want the figure, but now I need alternate text. Okay, so for those figures, once again, we can click on this and we could go to our object export options. And in the alt text field, if you choose custom, this is where you can add alternate text for this figure. Now, one of the things that InDesign does that no other program is able to do is you can also look into the metadata field of the image. So if I choose the description field, you can see that I am pulling in the metadata from that image, and I'm now using that as the alt text for that figure. That is a huge benefit of Adobe InDesign. And, you know, as I said before, you know, we as designers are really not the ideal person to be writing alternate text for these figures. So what's the solution? Well, honestly, like an author, an editor, a copy editor are much better suited for that task. And if you give them a copy of Adobe Bridge and direct them to the folder full of images, they can add the metadata for every image, and then you and I as designers can leverage that within Adobe InDesign. It's a huge benefit, and it's a great workflow, to be honest.
Which is probably a good time to talk about the plugin that we gave them.
Absolutely. So as one of the scripts that we provided to you guys that is in your handouts folder, one of the scripts that we gave you is called the alt text extractor. Now, what does that do? Well, if I run the alt text extractor, you can see that I get a message that says the final file was saved into the same folder as the InDesign document. So I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to go back out to my Finder, and inside of there, you will find a text file with the same name as your InDesign file. And I'm going to go ahead and open this with Excel.
One thing to note, guys, when you run this, your document must have at least, with all of the scripts, your document must have at least been saved once. So if you run the script, you're like, oh, it gives me an error, make sure that you haven't started with a brand new document and have not saved yet.
Sorry, guys, give me 1 second. Format cells. Go. So what this does is it tells you what page it's on, and then it also gives you a column where you can add the alt text for each of these images. So That's kind of weird. It's almost like it put the alt text in the name field.
Your database might have been off one. It depended upon how did you process that when you ran it?
I just double clicked on the script.
No, when you import it into Excel, it's a
I just
comma
opened. I
it's
just
a
opened. Oh. I basically just right clicked and said open with Excel.
right. There's the Excel processes the database file and it asks you what delimitation the file is in, and it should say comma delimited.
So I probably
And
need to do a file open on that
right.
instead.
But I thought you copy and pasted something when you were moving stuff around too.
No. Oh, well. Oh, okay.
There you
Okay,
go.
so what should I do?
It's delimited. So then you just
Okay.
hit next. And then it is tab delimited. Yep. Oh, so if there is extra characters, if you have a tab character in your alt text somewhere, it's going to screw it up. So I'm not sure what's going on with the images on 9, Chad. But normally this works just fine, guys. So what you do is you run it on your document, you get.
Yeah, it's okay. It's I wonder if the file name is oh no, the name of the file is
Holy cow.
ouch.
I was literally, guys, I was sweating bullets. I'm like, oh my gosh, we've been using this script for like 3 years. I know it works. I'm like, this is such a holy cow. Of course, when of course, the time you don't want it to have an issue, it has an issue. But here it is. The file name is actually that whole entire piece of.
That's funny.
Yeah. But so the nice thing about this is it'll pull out all of your alt text. So if you're just trying to check, did I get alt text for everything? You could run this script that in 1 second, it will show you all your missing alt text, right? And the other part of it too is you can then take that Excel file and go email it to someone else who's better at writing alt text than you, along with a PDF of the document, and let them run with it and give you back that file.
And then there's a second script called Alt Text Automator. And when you run that, you point it to the file in which you've added the alt text, and it sucks it into InDesign for every image in the document.
Makes it really great if you have multiple languages. You could run it for English and then translate it all into, I saw Valerie, there we go. And then run it into others. Valerie, if you're interested, I actually have another version of this file. And this is for anybody. We're not giving it away for free, but I do have a version that allows you to have multiple columns with different languages. And then when you want to import it back in, it says, hey, I've detected there's multiple languages in this document. Which one do you want to import the alt text for? And it actually allows you to do that. Also, we have one for form fields as well. It does all the descriptors in the form fields. So feel free to send me an email or reach out.
Valerie, I think you do for sure. Anybody else do multilingual text?
We actually just work in French.
Oh, really? Okay, sorry.
All right.
So it's while we're on that topic, I just wanted to let you guys know, I was helping somebody on the PDF accessibility Facebook group, and we discovered that when you export to a PDF, actually, let me just show this to you, right? So
just to FYI, we have 10 minutes left.
Yep.
All right.
So if I set my language to something else, such as French, is it French, Valerie, or French Canadian?
French Canadian.
So if I set my language to something else, Dax, I don't know if you know about this. Just something for everybody to be aware of. In the PDF file, the language is properly set. However, what we discovered is on the document tag, the language still defaults to US. And so it's kind of bizarre.
That would be a bug.
It's a bug for sure. But I mean, basically, I would just delete that from the document tag and you should be in good shape. But I'm pretty sure the document tag will override the document language.
Right. It's every element in a child, unless the child elements are also declared. So it would only be inconsequential if every other container tag in the document had it manually set to French Canadian. So if it's not set at all, then it's going to default to its parent. And in this case, the parent would be document and it would be English.
Yeah. So it's a pretty easy fix, but I think it's definitely a bug in InDesign, because somebody was asking about it and I'm like, I don't understand what the problem is until I tested it. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's no good, you know? So anyway. All right, guys. Master pages, right? So, you know, if I view the master page for this document, you can see that the header and footer on all the pages of my document I have on the master page. The benefit of doing this is that anything on the master page will be artifacted, right? So that's the advantage of using a master page. The area where people get in trouble is if they have a link on the master page. That does not work. And the reason is because the link always exports, but because the content on the master page is being artifacted, the link has nothing to attach itself to. And so you're going to get a bunch of errors for untagged annotations when you try to verify the document for compliance. So my rule for you is don't put a link on a master page. If you do, the only way you can get it to work is if you override that item from the master page. Then the link will have something to attach itself to. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
So, Chad, this is Shannon. In thinking about some of the documents that individuals in my company create, they will put buttons, so to speak, but they're hyperlink buttons to go forward or backward to the various pages. So what you're saying is that those will export in and so you don't need those in the PDF for a screen share. So could you just delete them then?
You mean the links?
Like from the tag tree, could you just delete those entirely? Like, because you don't need those.
So the hard part here is that this goes back to kind of ableist kind of thinking that we just get entrapped in. We've all been there. I've done documents for literally blind associations who put these menu bars all across the top to be able to navigate from like section to chapter, and they make it all nice and fancy. The problem is, if that's on a master page, it's artifacted. It's not tagged, just like your navigation buttons, like to next chapter or this previous chapter. The problem with it is you can't detach one from the other. If you delete it for everyone. So you can't make it, people who are using a mouse can have access to the button, but people who are using a screen reader can it's not going to throw an error or get an untagged annotation. There's no, you can't have your cake and eat it too. It's one way or the other. Did that answer your question correctly?
I'm following. So ultimately the solution is to override it and bring it forward then.
Yes, if I wanted to have it as a actionable item for everyone, then I would want to bring it forward, control shift click to convert to master, to bring it forward before I export. That's going to save you that issue. Because anything you do inside the PDF is going to remove it. Well, I guess either you're going to have to reset it for every page so that the tags tree is correct, or remove it so that no one can use it.
Okay.
And you can, Shannon, in the pages panel, you can click on the panel menu and there's an option, override all parent page items. So that will literally override every master item on every page and make it a document, a page level item.
It just does it on the page you're on.
No, it does it on all of them. Or like if you have no pages selected, it'll do it on all of them.
Okay, yeah.
Or you can select all of the pages and then choose that option and it'll do it to all of them as well.
But then nothing is artifact from the master because they're not masters anymore.
That is correct. And so I'll take you one step further. When you go to a master page, you can click on an object. And if you go to the panel menu, you can go to parent pages and enable allow parent item overrides on selection. Did I just blow your mind, Valerie?
Yeah.
And so what this does is it basically says, when I use that command, override all parent page items, only override the ones that I said is okay to override. So if you're like, I don't want this, but I do want that, you can control that.
Chad, I learned something new from you every time we do this class. I've been using InDesign for, I don't know how freaking long, and I never knew that.
That kind of reassures me that you just learned that too. I felt stupid not knowing it.
Nope.
Yeah, it's very powerful, and it kind of allows you to overcome that limitation, because I know what you're saying. It's like, well, I want these overridden, but I don't want these items overridden, and you can actually control that, which is pretty cool. Awesome, guys. Does anybody have any questions? I feel like I was pretty comprehensive. I feel like I like unloaded everything in my brain to you in that 3-hour session.
Hey, Chad, did we go over we went over the hide the colors, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And did we talk about the whole idea of if you guys share on social media anywhere, tag us what you got out of this class, something you learned, something positive, just tag us in the post, and I follow everything all the time. So if you tag me, I'll know it. And then I'll send you that script so that you can then turn those items off.
It would be easiest if you all just did it. That way, when I send you your certificates, I can just give you all that script.
I like that, Chad. I like the way you're thinking there, right?
It's like, make my life easy. Just everybody do it, and then I can send it all to you.
The hardest part about it, guys, is that people tend to get a little gun shy when it comes to spending money on training, right? And the nagging question is, oh, I'm not sure if it's going to be worth it. So hopefully you guys felt like it was worth it. And we just want other people to be able to share in that, to understand that they're going to get some great benefit out of it. We pack so much into this class, and honestly, we could go for another, Chad and I have a 3-hour version of this class and a 6-hour version of this class, a full day's worth of training. So if you're interested in that, obviously send us an email message and we can schedule for your group the 6-hour training that really does work with your own files. We're dealing with your specific issues, and you're going to walk away with solutions to your workflow that are really going to help you out. So we really appreciate you guys. And yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you. That was awesome.
And of course, our Facebook group, guys, if you have more questions, reach out to us on the Facebook group or LinkedIn. Find us on LinkedIn, and we're happy to give you extra little guidance. Hey, couldn't talk about this in the class, but we're struggling with this or that. Let us know and we'll help you out.